I'm Calvin Simons, co-founder of a chapter of the Alliance in Sonoma County. This is April 22nd, 1996. I'm talking to Howard Zinn, Professor Emeritus of History and Political Science at Boston University. He is here at Santa Rosa Junior College, Santa Rosa, California, on a speaking tour. He has agreed to talk with me about the Alliance movement in the United States, a populist movement recently launched by journalist Ronnie Duggar. Howard, your interest in the Alliance came to my attention when I saw a videotape of your introduction of Ronnie Duggar when he spoke at the Cambridge Forum on December 6, 1995. In your introduction, you described the emergence of the Alliance as, quote, one of those moments in history that is the beginning of something important. What makes you feel that way about the Alliance?
Well, I think there's a special moment in history for the Alliance because I think we're at one of those points where the similarity of the two major parties on all the important issues of the day is more evident than it has been in a long time. I mean, the bipartisan nature of the American system has been true ever from the very beginning, despite all the sort of exaggerated notions of the difference between a Democratic and a Republican Party. But from the very beginning, it's been a very sort of consistent hewing to a certain line. Richard Hofstadter in the American political tradition did a remarkable thing in which he took figures from both the supposed liberal and conservative past of the United States, FDR and Hoover, Woodrow Wilson and Theodore Roosevelt, and the founding fathers, the Jeffersonians and the Hamiltonians, and pointed out how really both of them hewed to certain fundamental principles, and those fundamental principles had to do with nationalism and capitalism and the notion of private enterprise. And basically those same principles guide the Democratic and Republican parties today. Democratic and Republican parties today are both parties that are very closely connected with corporate wealth. They both follow the same fundamental foreign policy. They both support enormous military budgets and only sort of differ in small ways on how much social spending there should be to take care of human needs in this country. And that has become more and more glaring. And so for Ronnie Duggar to come forth at this time with the idea for a third party or a third movement, because it's not yet a political party, it's still, you might say, a pre-party, a movement, I think is absolutely good and necessary timing.
Now, you and many others, including myself, have been attracted to the Alliance as a means to bring about social change then. How can this be translated into a broad-based appeal which will motivate people of all types to become a part of the movement?
Well, it's true that this has been a problem with third parties, drawing on a very sort of narrow part of the sort of liberal left spectrum in the United States, and there's always been a difficulty of bringing a very wide variety of groups together. When this happens, it happens when there is an overriding social issue. For instance, in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, early 70s, there was a kind of national consensus around the issue of civil rights. And it was possible then to bring very, very large numbers of Americans together on the issue in such numbers that the national government, administration, had to respond. After all, the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and Voting Rights Act 1965 were not initiated really by Congress or the President. They were responses to a mass movement which includes all sorts of people. Same thing happened during the anti-war movement during the Vietnam years. And that is all sorts of people were brought together because there was a sort of single dramatic overriding issue that aroused the indignation of all sorts of people around the country. So the problem now for the Alliance is to concentrate on the kind of issues that form a common denominator to the environmental movement, the women's movement, the labor movement, the black movement, and I think that's possible to do that. That is, I think if I had to identify what that common denominator is, what that issue is that really touches on all of the concerns of all of these progressive elements in the United States, I would say it is the issue of what do we do with our national wealth? How do we distribute our national wealth rationally and justly? How do we take the $265 billion in the military budget and adapt it for human needs? How do we change the tax structure so that we take back the $1 trillion or so that went to the upper 1% of the population as a result of what they call tax reform in the last 15 years? How to take that huge sum of money and use it for all of those things we claim we don't have money for. And I think that issue of what do we do with this wealth is something that touches on the problems of black people, of Latino people, of people who live in the cities, people who are the victims themselves, the victims of crime and the victims of poverty and drugs and all that means. I think it touches on women's issues because so many of women's issues depend on how do you help women who are in need, women who are taking care of children and who have no help. It touches obviously on the environmental problem, because there seems to be no money in the budget to take care of cleaning up the air, cleaning up the water, creating a mass transit system to replace the pollution of the highways and so on. I think the possibility is there for building a very broad movement around such issues.
That's encouraging. Now, you did say that the Alliance at this point is a movement and not a political party. How do you characterize the distinction between the two? And secondly, how do you believe this movement can affect the economic political system unless it can be translated into political action?
Well, I think there was a very good reason why Ronnie Duggar chose to call it a movement or an alliance instead of a party. And that is because we are so enthralled to the two-party system, and there is such a history of failed third-party movements. The American people know that the third parties have historically had a very, very, very difficult time of electing candidates. And so if you announce yourself as a third party from the start, you immediately have lost a large part of your possible supporters who are very practical people and who say, a third party is simply not going to win. So I think it makes a lot of sense to build a movement, which is a movement around issues and not around candidates, until that movement gets powerful enough, strong enough, to begin acting like a political party, which means maybe initially supporting local candidates, might support local candidates in one or another party, depending on how they stand on the issues, or you might, where the Democrats and Republicans take similar stands, you might run independent candidates and work up from the victories in local elections to the beginning of